Hello and welcome to all of our guests. Really glad to have you join us. I'm Gary Huggins, Executive Director of the Direct Selling Education Foundation. Really appreciate having you with us for the DSEF Insights series as part of DSA Engage. Today we're going to have an important discussion on the very significant economic impact direct selling has on the U.S. economy. We want to share key findings from this impactful research authored by Dr. Robert Peterson of the University of Texas and a DSEF fellow, as well as have a discussion on how we can take action to ensure that this impactful research becomes influential research. And we'll also have a conversation about creating tools to make that happen. We would like this to be an interactive discussion. So I want to encourage you all to use the Q&A function throughout and put your questions in. We'll do our best to answer those questions following the initial presentation and discussion that we want to have. We also want to respect your time. We expect this to be a crisp 40-minute conversation. And so we encourage you to get those questions in early and keep them coming. Now I'd like to introduce two great speakers that we have with us today, and we'll introduce a special guest joining us later as well. First, Dr. Robert Peterson from the University of Texas. He's the John Stewart III Centennial Chair in Business Administration at Texas. As I mentioned, a DSEF fellow, an icon in the marketing and business field. He served as vice president of the University of Texas. He served on the board of a major direct selling company. He's been a past DSEF board member, current member of the foundation's Academic Advisory Council. We appreciate Bob's ongoing counsel for the foundation. He's presented to congressional committees and leaders on important direct selling topics. He's prolific in publishing and research on the channel and quite an expert, and does some expert witness work as well. Bob has completed 2 economic impact studies for the foundation on the channel and is here to talk about the latest one today. We also have Kim Drabik, who's the Vice President of Corporate Affairs at Plexus Worldwide. Kim, really appreciate having you. Kim oversees the implementation of strategic communications and government affairs, among many other important duties at Plexus. She serves on the DSEF Board of Directors, and we appreciate her leadership there as well. And Kim was formerly head of global head of industry and shareholder relations at Amway. So deeply involved in the work of not only DSA companies, but the DSA, DSEF, and the World Federation. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Bob. Bob is going to do a presentation on his research and conclusions, and then we'll go from there to have a little bit of a discussion among the 3 or 4 of us. Bob?
Okay. Thank you, Gary. So as Gary said, I recently completed an economic analysis study of the direct selling industry. I used what we call an input-output model to estimate the overall economic effect of direct selling. Now, you might think of direct selling as just having an effect by itself, but it has a much broader effect, and I'm going to talk about that today. This is a second economic impact study that I've done, and this one was done in conjunction with the University of Colorado. So I don't want all the credit to go to my university, but we have to mention the University of Colorado. The analysis started by looking at the sales made by companies in the direct selling industry, and we call that the direct effect. No pun intended. But to get those sales, firms in the direct selling industry have to have an input from the supply chain, the manufacturers and the wholesalers that provide the products and the services to direct selling companies. We call that supply chain effect the indirect effect. Okay, so the output of the supply chain becomes the input of direct selling, and the output of direct selling goes to what we call the household effect or the induced effect. So in the analysis, we look at three effects of direct selling. We look at the direct effect of direct selling companies per se, plus the effect of those companies on its supply chain, the indirect effect, and the effect of the household members that work in the direct selling industry or in the supply chain. As you can see on this chart, the overall economic impact of direct selling is $111.4 billion in 2022. That overall impact of $111 billion is comprised of the direct effect, which is $40.5 billion, the indirect effect, which is $31.0 billion, and the induced effect, which is $39.9 billion. So when you look at direct selling, you don't just look at the sales of the direct selling industry per se. You need to look at the overall economic impact of direct selling. And that's substantial, $111 billion. Now, you can see from the chart that we have some other statistics there. The top one is the derived multiplier, and that number is 2.75. What does that mean? That means that every dollar of direct selling sales accounts for $2.75 of economic activity. That's the multiplier of direct selling. For comparison purposes, the derived multiplier for retailing in general, that'd be the big box stores, malls, whatever, is 2.44. So the impact of direct selling is actually greater than the general retailing impact. Okay, second number there, 34%. 34% is the increase in economic impact from 2016. In 2016, the total economic impact was $83 billion. And so we have a 34% increase. Of that 34% increase, I calculated about a third. A third of that is due to actual real growth in the industry. 2/3 is due to inflation. And we all know that inflation was rampant these last few years. It's interesting to me that the increase in economic impact is really coming from the induced effect. Now, you would expect to have a direct relationship, and there is, between the supply chain sales and direct selling sales. They just work together. But what we're seeing is the increase in economic impact is due to the effect of the households or the induced effect. And to me, that's something that you need to consider very carefully and communicate to your sales force. Okay, finally, if we look on the right here, you'll see that the fiscal impact was about $15.5 billion. The majority of that is due to federal impact, 9.5 billion, and then the state and local impact, which is 6 billion. So that's kind of a quick summary of the economic impact study that I recently completed. And I'd like to just leave it at that. And then if Gary or someone else has questions about specifics, we can get to those and I'll answer those.
All right. Hey, Bob, thank you. That's fantastic. And again, I want to encourage our guests to put questions in that Q&A function as they come to you, as they come along. One of the questions I wanted to ask, Bob, is that in media and other outreach, you've spoken about that $111 billion number as conservative. I would love for you to sort of elaborate on that for our friends and sort of why you look at it that way.
So the $111 billion overall economic impact is, in my opinion, very conservative. And what that really means is probably an understatement of the actual economic impact of direct selling. Why is that? Well, there are two main factors. First, the direct selling industry is unique. It's unique in terms of the variety of products and services that it offers consumers. And that variety is very difficult to model with traditional data. So I went down to the 6-digit NAICS codes, which is very detailed, but even that does not fully encompass the products and services that are in direct selling. Secondly, direct selling is a very unique industry in that the salespeople are independent contractors. The models that we use using government data simply don't really account for independent contractors to the extent that they should. So two factors, the structure of the industry and the products and services lead me to believe that we have an understatement of the economic impact of direct selling.
Gotcha. That's really helpful to know. And I think you explained it pretty well, but I think there's often confusion over the factors that make up that 111 billion and how to talk about that, and how the companies might talk about that, how the field might talk about that. Any other light you would shed on that?
Well, again, there are the three sectors that comprise the economic impact of direct selling. Direct selling itself, the direct effect, the supply chain, all the manufacturers and the wholesalers that supply the products and services to direct selling companies. And then this third sector, the household sector, we call that the induced effect. And that really consists of the households that either have somebody that works in direct selling or works in the supply chain for direct selling. But again, to a large extent, that misses the independent contractors. And so, we can look at that impact, and even though that impact in the induced effect is the one that's really grown since 2016, I think that's understated here.
Sure. I have a question.
If I can
Please go ahead.
add to that a little bit, because I agree with that in terms of, you have independent direct sellers that are independent contractors, and they themselves, depending on how large their own business is, they're employing people and they're spending on office supplies, that sort of thing. So yes, that induced impact is likely very underrated.
Yeah, I agree. We've got a question from our guests asking which companies were included in the study, and was it just DSA members? Bob, I'll let you speak first, and then I'll add something that I want to add as well.
The starting point in my analysis consisted of the DSA annual report, where you look at direct selling sales. And as you probably know, the DSA hires an independent contractor to provide an objective, quantifiable view of direct selling. And this independent contractor or company starts by looking at the sales of members of the Direct Selling Association, but it goes far beyond that. They have some very sophisticated techniques that they can use to estimate the sales that are not simply reported by DSA members. And I worked with that company for a couple of years. I have a lot of confidence in it. So the bottom line is, these are sales of companies in the direct selling industry, whether or not they are members of DSA.
Got you. And one plug I will throw in on top of that is, it does point to the importance of participation in the DSA Growth and Outlook study. Adds to the quality of that data and what we're able to do as well. So I want to encourage everyone to make sure that they're participating on that as well. Bob, thank you for that summary. Incredibly helpful, and I know you're going to hang around for some additional conversation that we want to have with Kim and JJ McGrath, who will be joining us soon as well. Before we move on to that discussion, I wanted to say a thank you, first of all, to our contributors who support the work of the foundation. We got a list of them coming up in front of you now. All of these companies, thank you for being on this list. Thank you for making this possible. Credible experts doing research like this that advances understanding and acceptance and support for the industry does not happen without your support and your help. So we want to encourage or thank those who do contribute, encourage those who have not yet contributed. We would like you to do so. It's very important. We need your help in reaching our goal for the year. You see we're about 78% of the way there. You've got a QR code right in front of you. You can get that directly from your screen. In the chat, there's also a direct link where you can go to our donation page and make a donation there. So if you've not contributed to DSEF at this point this year, we need you. The great work that Bob and his 250 plus colleagues, academics around the country are doing would not happen without your support. So thank you for those who have, and thank you for those who will. Quick transition. I want to bring sort of more formally into the conversation Kim Drabik, introduced earlier, but also JJ McGrath has agreed to join us, and we really appreciate having JJ with us from Amway. He's the Senior Executive Communication Specialist there, also has pretty extensive experience on Capitol Hill. So JJ and Kim, welcome to the sort of second half of the discussion.
Thanks, Gary. And hey, Gary, real quick, I just want to touch on that last slide you had. Gary just talked about how I used to work on Capitol Hill. On Capitol Hill, one of the main functions that legal advisors, legislative staff, policy advisors, agency staff, one of the main ways that they determine whether or not policy needs to be created or adjusted, amended, is largely through research, right? And so as an industry, I think one of the greatest things that we have as an ally, as a resource, is the DSEF, the academic fellows, who put out this third-party, objective resource that's available to policy advisors and policy experts, subject matter experts. And so, I know sales are down. I know it's tough times for all of us, but one thing that we've got to keep on our minds is that folks like Dr. Peterson and our fellows around the country could really use our support, our money, to be truthful, to keep the DSEF building this repository of research that will be used in legislative conversations. As I know, a lot of folks on this call and in the DSA organization don't necessarily have government affairs staff. This is kind of your way of being able to advocate for our industry. So just keep that on your minds. I know sometimes fundraising emails get lost in our inboxes, but Gary is a great resource if you're ever interested in contributing to this work, which is really important for our industry.
Appreciate that, JJ. Thank you. Kim, so
Yes.
Taking into account what Bob was talking about, and as I mentioned earlier, you've got deep experience with impact studies, global impact studies, national impact studies, and your company has done impact studies as well. Before we get into the company level, though, I would love to hear from first you and JJ on the value you see in this information and in this research, because there's a lot of regulatory challenges in front of the industry right now. It's an interesting time for sure, but I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on that.
I think, from my perspective, and I'm going to go way back in time here, this is really the heart of debunking that we're all pyramid schemes. There is an economic impact. There's an economic output. And I go back to, oh my gosh, this is going to be 2005. And I know that Kimberly remembers this, but it was Dick DeVos was chairman of WFDSA at the time. And he was doing a presentation to media and consumer advocacy groups. And he was using a Price Waterhouse economic impact study that was done in Europe 5 years prior. But because it was third-party data proving the economic impact, it had value to media and elected officials and that sort of thing. And that's when WFDSA kind of took off and started doing economic impact studies across the globe. So I think it's a really wonderful way to talk about, you're not just saying, well, we're here, this is what we do. It's actually third-party data that we're able to give credibly in those conversations. We use it in media conversations and that sort of thing as well. And then I'll fast forward to when I joined Plexus 5 years ago. We have since done, and we'll show that in a while, 2 economic impact studies with ASU. As we started to develop those relationships with elected officials, talking to media, that sort of thing. We were able to talk about the larger impact of direct selling, but then also able to talk about our impact globally and far down as Maricopa County here in the Phoenix area.
Fantastic, fantastic. I want to encourage everyone, keep those questions coming to the Q&A function. JJ, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just want to add to Kim's point about credibility. I mean, at the end of the day, why is any economic impact study done for any industry, right? It's to show government agents, universities, and the population, the general population, that an industry is generating an impact that is positive, right? So thanks to Dr. Peterson, we're able to go and show how many dollars our organizations as a collective have gone out into the marketplace and had both downstream and upstream effects. So, you talked about this just a second ago, but Dr. Peterson and a number of others have advocated for us both in congressional committees, which I know a lot of us on this call probably avoid politics like a beehive, but in the other cases, when we have court cases, right? When the industry goes to court, Dr. Peterson and other subject matter experts are able to advocate for us using data like this to show that there is credibility behind our industry and to Kim's point, debunking some of the myths.
Thank you. And Kim, to your point a second ago, perhaps we can show your slide now. I think it'd be interesting as we sort of begin to talk about how companies can and should use this information to broaden the message, broaden the impact, and the influence. As we said earlier, maybe talk a little bit about what your company's done in that realm.
Sure. If we bring that slide up here, and this was based upon the last study we had done. If you look on the left, this was actually our total impact of the U.S. economy, our GDP impact to Arizona. Again, we're talking, when you talk about the induced impact, how many jobs, U.S. jobs we supported through direct selling, and then labor income, and then in sales taxes. So I'm able to now use fresh economic impact data from what Dr. Peterson has done, show the broader scale, show what Plexus has done. And then on the right here is like a partial portion of a one-pager. If I'm going in and trying to talk to media, elected officials, this happens to be Florida, right? We were doing an activity in Florida at a food bank. I wanted to invite local elected officials to show them, here's who we are, here's our commitment to community, and by the way, here's the impact in your state. And then we also, from this, put together a microsite, and it's called Global Plexus, or it's Plexus Study. I think it's Plexus Impact Study. I'll put it in the chat when I find it. But we use all of that in terms of the different regions based upon economic impact. We find this highly credible when we're talking to media, or we want media to show up. They're like, wow, look at what they're doing in our area. You're really able to get down to a local level on things.
Yeah, that's fantastic. JJ, is that something that you guys have considered?
Of course. Yeah, no, actually, it's something we're in conversations about right now. I was just taking a look. Sorry, I was distracted. I was taking a look at Kim's study. It's impressive. And that's, going back to what I've kind of said 2 or 3 times now, that information is really useful. And for Dr. Peterson to have the impact study put out, what we're able to do is go directly to, and what Kim's able to do with her study is go directly to regulators and legislators who focus on a specific area, show that individual where the impact occurs, and then remind them when they go to vote on a piece of legislation that could impact our industry, or positively, right, put legislation forward that we want, remind them how many constituents they have that are impacted by our industry. It's great information that we're definitely looking at putting together ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, that localized is really interesting as well. I know there was recently a impact study done for the state of Utah, focusing on that impact as well. That's helpful in that local sense. I'm curious from the two of you, thinking about how disinformation, Dr. Peterson's research, benefits companies and the way you share it with your field, and does that tell them anything about the value of what they're a part of, and can they use that productively as well? Kim?
I think we've talked about this a little bit with JJ and with Cindy Drogue and that sort of thing. This is just the start, right? And we need to put together this toolkit that makes it very easy for companies to add their own information on top of what is already done. And I would say for the sales force, if they're having a meeting or something, they're able to use this information in terms of showing third-party credibility again, that this isn't just Amway, Plexus, whatever company it is, that this is information that was done by professors that are respected in the electeds community. But we need to simplify it in ways that's very understandable and can be reshared immediately.
Yeah.
And that it's consistent.
Yeah, I was going to say pretty much the same thing, Gary, which is that, chunking this down into very digestible bits, right? So $111 billion is an easy number to share with your leaders, right? So if you've got folks on this call who work directly with the field or can get information like this over to your sales teams, sharing this with your leaders gives them, I think, a little bit of an incentive to share it with their downlines or people within their organization. I think it's just a little encouraging, right? If they're meeting with people constantly, having conversations and feeling a little discouraged, or they need some, bit of credibility that they can share with their teams, this is a really good piece of information to share that they can go and tell their teams, hey, our industry, maybe not our individual company, but our industry has a $111 billion impact across the country since 2022.
Yeah, I think that's powerful, JJ. I agree with both of you on that. And Kim, to your point, one of the things that I want to make clear as we're talking today is there'll be some follow-up with that toolkit idea, because we've learned from what you guys have done at Plexus and you guys have done at Amway to really kind of help make this as easy as we can. I know Kirsten Aguilar, who's at a Synergence event as we speak, has been sharing this information with their field and getting great feedback. She talked about it in our last board meeting of, a lot of field leaders saying, oh my gosh, can I use that information? I want to talk about this. It's going to help my credibility and help me get a message out there as well. So important to do that. I'm curious as well, because of the social impact and other parts of the puzzle. The foundation just finished and shared the consumer attitude study, which is a survey study of 2,000 people out there conducted by Ipsos that had some interesting findings about clearly growing interest in gigs in general, direct selling to a lesser extent, but that number keeps increasing. And some opportunity there to add some depth and some heft to maybe some concerns people might have about not really understanding the direct selling opportunity, et cetera. I'd be curious to know either or both of your thoughts on how to incorporate that into the communications with fields and companies as well.
I think from my perspective, I would marry it with the information on the economic side. Again, Ipsos, a really credible research company. And when you look at the consumer attitude study in terms of gig, people open to entrepreneurship, it's really increased. So we're privately held, but I'm thinking about companies that have investor community and that sort of thing. It's really showing a positive trend. And then when you look at the high delivery, high impact corner of that, you think about all the features of flexible work and direct selling. It enables and earning a supplemental income. It enables me to define my own success, allows me to choose my own work schedule. These are things that were all really important to people. So it shows those social impact features as well that you can add to the economic data. I think to feature both in the same messaging is powerful.
Yeah,
Yeah, Gary, I was gonna say almost the identical thing. I mean, marrying the two data sets, right? One is the why and one is the what. So when you have conversations with your field, when you have conversations with regulators, local legislators, or investors, right? Showing them what the impact is, but then describing why it looks to that it's growing, right? That it's grown so much since the last one was done. And that's because people are getting to the point, at least, we see that here. We all see that in our daily lives. People are getting to the point, especially this next generation, where they want flexibility. And this industry provides a really flexible opportunity to make some extra income.
Yeah. And, Dr. Peterson, I want to bring you back into this, Bob. You've done some extensive research on gigs and where that's all going as well, but also research on other benefits that people get from a direct selling experience, which I think plays usefully into this conversation. I'd love to hear your thoughts on both.
So thanks, Gary. Yes, I've done quite a bit of research on the gig economy lately, from a kind of a micro level, the micro entrepreneur. And the two things that have really jumped out at me that seem to be contrary to what you see in the media. Number one, the gig economy is not simply a software platform economy. All we hear about Uber drivers or Lyft drivers and delivery and stuff. When you look at the numbers, that's actually a very small segment of the gig economy and of gig workers. They get a lot of press, but it's a small segment. Secondly, the gig workers are incredibly heterogeneous. You cannot think, hey, you're a gig worker and you're all the same. I mean, they have tremendously different motivations. You could just do something as simple as an age segmentation, and different ages are in the gig economy for very different reasons. Some are not even there to make money. They're simply there just for the social contacts. So when you look at the gig economy as a direct seller, I think there's opportunity there if you're smart about it. And just don't listen to what the media say and all the pundits say, but get in and do some really in-depth research. And I think that can be very beneficial. One of the things, get up to your second point here, I've done extensive research on the benefits that accrue to direct sellers that are not economic benefits. When we ask direct sellers, what was the benefit of being a direct seller? These people have grown. They've grown in their personalities. They've grown in their social skills. They've grown in their confidence. And to me, that should be a real selling point of direct selling.
Yeah.
Not simply, hey, go out and you can make a lot of money, or, yeah, here's a little extra money you can make by going out. But the other benefits that accrue to direct sellers, to me, are much more important. And that should be communicated. And we have the research that actually documents that.
Yeah, I think, Bob, that is such fantastic research that you've done. And we've shared that broadly. And, we want to incorporate it into this toolkit that we're talking about putting together and sharing as well. Kimberly's put that in the chat, a link to that study for everyone as well. And one of the things I think is really important about that, Bob, is that study really highlights the personal and professional benefits that come from a direct selling experience, for sure, but how that affects not only your direct selling success, but your success in whatever your day job might be, or whatever other things that you're doing as well. That carries forward, and that's a real benefit for folks. We have a question, and we're getting toward the end, so I want to encourage once again, if you have questions, get them to us. But a question about whether we will share a one-page executive summary of the salient results of the study, for sure. In fact, right on the back end of this call, though we distributed it fairly widely, but we're going to give everybody a link to the study itself, a one-pager explaining the key points and most important benefits that Bob has discovered and put forward, and also press release from the media work we've done previously on the press release. And again, more of that coming as we go forward. Kim and JJ, as we get toward the end here, I'm just curious from either of you, anything that I should have asked you in terms of what we can do to better leverage the sales force? Maybe I'll hone in on that in particular. How can we better leverage the sales force to amplify this message as well? We've talked a little bit about how this message is encouraging and useful to them. Is there a way, media or whatever the platforms might be, to kind of leverage their reach with this information too?
You know, Kim actually talked about this a little bit. There's a couple of things I think that we as an industry could do using the economic impact study and some of the other studies that we have. And also, I think it's worth just calling out, Gary, how cool is it that we have professors around the country, you know, analyzing our industry and coming back with intel that we can then go and use with both our field, right, in the way that we work with our field, but then additionally on the government regulation side, which is so important. I think it's just awesome. And again, I'll be the shameless one here. You know, we really need to fund this. We really need to support this stuff. It's really important work. And so I hope all of you will join Amway and Plexus and all the other great companies that Gary listed up there. But I think the one thing that Kim had already mentioned was media, right? So an executive media prep. Your executives are the ones that are saying things your field are listening to, right? So if our leaders are going out and when they talk to press, when they talk to other folks around the country, if they're using these taglines of our industry is a $111 billion industry, I want you guys to, after this call, I want you guys to go and look at other industries and how much, look up how much their other industries are annually contributing to the marketplace. I think you will be incredibly amazed at how much money our industry contributes compared to others, others that you know of very well. It's a great statistic, and having our leaders go out into the public and kind of lay the building blocks out for the field to then go and replicate is a really easy way to do it. I think one other thing is to amplify these data points in social media, right? We've all got a graphics personnel on staff or a social media team that can go on, you know, Canva or some other software, Adobe, and put together a graphic that just says, you know, 2022 direct selling industry has $111 billion in economic impact, along with some of the other data we just talked about with the consumer behaviors and whatnot. But putting those out there for the field to then share, right? I think those are two really easy things for us to do as industry leaders and organizations.
Fantastic. Kim, anything to add to that?
No, I was going to say JJ just explained everything I would have said. And especially with your executives and your leaders repeating that information, because that's where the field's going to pick it up. Yeah. Certainly. And then if corporate shares that information on social, again, that gets picked up by the field as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One last question I have for Bob, and then I want to sum us up a little bit here at the end, but and then some important announcements that I want you to hang on for as well. Bob, as you think about future research, other factors we might look at that we haven't been able to look at to this point in this realm, anything come to mind from your perspective?
So let me finish with 3 different points that are really unrelated.
Yeah.
Got to market the fellows in DSEF. First, to your specific question, in doing this research, I found that there is really a tremendous local impact of direct selling on cities, counties, metropolitan areas that doesn't seem to be captured. So I have the national studies, $110 billion, that's fine. But if you look at where direct selling companies have their conventions and their conferences, there's a tremendous absolute dollar impact on that economy that nobody seems to acknowledge or think about. And I can list 2 or 3 cities that have benefit tremendously every year from the direct sellers coming in for their conferences and seminars or whatever. And so research needs to be done there. Second, I want to put in a plug for the fellows. The fellows can do research on direct selling that a direct selling company would not ordinarily fund. They say, well, that's not really interesting. It's not going to help us right now. But the fellows can do interesting things that if you're creative as a direct selling company, you can then apply and improve what you do. And I'll give you a specific example. Again, personally, I have a study that I just have published looking at turnover in direct selling companies. Turnover, to me, is a pretty important issue for direct selling. And I was able to get a lift in predicting who was going to leave and who was going to stay in a direct selling company. But it wasn't by the reasons that they joined a direct selling company. It was the number of different reasons. Think about that. It's not what they don't say. When you do your interviews, say you want to join because you're going to make more money or the flexibility, or you can buy the products, it's good for the family. Sure. It's not the specific reasons, but it's the number of reasons that I could use. And you could ask those questions, the 12 questions to people, and you can get a good prediction of who's going to stay and who's going to leave. Okay, I think just to think about that.
Yeah.
Secondly, going back to, I think, what JJ said in a way, the fellows can be very useful in one way that you don't think about, and that's in litigation and regulatory matters. I mean, in the last 2 years, I've personally been involved in 2 major cases, and I think that my research actually helped to settle one and get the second one dismissed. Another fellow we know that had a major impact on the biggest case in the last year in direct selling. So there's a way to use fellows and the DSEF pool of fellows that we shouldn't be talking about as academics, but in fact could be a very, very important benefit to individual companies that face all these regulatory or legal matters.
Perfectly said, Bob. And I think that's a great summation. And we have you to thank not only for this research that we've talked about today, and that we're going to continue the conversation and provide tools to leverage, but we have you to thank as kind of the father of the Fellows Program, who really set us on this course to make this happen. And to just put some numbers to it, we've got 256 academic fellows who are aligned with the industry, work with the industry, and do this research. They're following along, they're learning, they're becoming experts. They're providing analytics directly to companies. They're providing this broad kind of research that contextualizes, explains the industry. There is so much value there to connect directly to what companies need now, but also to what the industry needs in broader conversations. So with that, Kim, JJ, and Bob, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. And to our friends out there, much more to come on toolkits and ways to make this easy for you to use and leverage the great information that Bob's put forward. If I can get Tamara to put up a slide real quick, I want to talk to our friends about upcoming DSA events before we adjourn. September 10th is DSA Social Media Day. Sign up if you have not. Always a fantastic experience and useful for companies. Direct Selling Day on Capitol Hill, critical in this important year. We've had great participation from companies and really need that to continue, not just continue, but to grow in this really critical and important year. The DSA Legal and Regulatory Seminar, October 16th to 18th in Washington, D.C., always deep and important discussions that affect the future of companies. Make sure you're a part of that. And the Direct Selling Certification Program offered on October 16th, 22nd, and 24th. If you've not participated, it's a fantastic program. And you should either join up right away or ask your colleagues about the value they've gotten from it, because it's fantastic. And in November, the DSA Finance and Payments Seminar. Thank you again for being part of the DSEF Insights conversation. We look forward to more of these, more to come from us, and we thank our friends, Kim, JJ, and Bob for making this possible. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.